I would like to thank you for your investment in ICRI 2022. Your investment of time, of energy, of knowledge, of the experience that you shared with the others. I would like to really thank you for everything you did during the whole week, not only yesterday and the day before. And we have learned truly a lot. Maybe you remember some of those. When we talked about what was happening during the day, we opened up with, for example, Clara Sampson saying, ICRI 2022 brings critical contribution to research and science in times when it's needed the most. When we talk about what will the key topics of the conference be, when we concentrated on some of the key issues, such as COVID-19 and the pandemics of infection diseases, when we talk about how important it is to make sure that we can have truly excellent research, scientific services leading to advanced training, bringing people together to innovation and transition. When we were talking about possibilities of cooperation, and something was quite depressive, because, you know, all models are wrong. But some were truly positive, because they are better than nothing. These are some of the pieces of information you learned during ICRI 2020 and were noted, sketch noted to be precise, thanks to Masarykova, who is making sure that she is covering everything even today. The work of Masarykova is naturally available to you as well. You can download it, you can get the picture, as well as you can get the selfie with the picture. It's truly no trouble at all. Don't hesitate at all. And you will learn more, because nobody has had the chance to see everything, to experience everything. And that's why we are here to get the lessons learned. And we will go step by step, starting with parallel sessions. The first one concerns COVID-19 and pandemics of infectious diseases. It will be presented by the chair of European Strategy Forum on Research Infrastructures, Mrs. Jana Kolář. Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Can I have the first presentation? Thank you. Yes, so is there a slide before this one? No, because I deleted it. Sorry. Okay, very good. Thank you. So we had a very fruitful session on COVID. That was a parallel session following the panel session which we had on the first day. We had speakers from 4 parts of the world: Nakhla Fifi from Qatar, Carlos Bachtani from Uruguay, Evan Harrison from UK, and Katarina Biscari from Alba. They all came from facilities that supported research related to COVID. What the results of the discussions were that, first of all, scientists moved immediately. They were also, in all parts of the world, heard by the politicians, although the mechanisms were quite different. In one case, the brother of a minister was instrumental. In the other one, for example, the chief science advisor. Now, what is also extremely important is that funds were allocated to support the scientific development, because without the funds, the institutions could only proceed to a limited extent. The fact that the funds were provided enabled them to address it properly and to the extent needed. All the speakers emphasized that prior research, also fundamental research, was instrumental for the rapid development of answers to the solutions of the pandemic. Also, science progressed, especially some fields of science developed tremendously during the COVID, and that is particularly the data, openness to data. Publications were published prior to their publication in the journals. Data were shared immediately. So open access to data and publications is really something that enables us also to have vaccines so soon. And there was also a discussion about communication, the way we communicated. So to recap, the pandemic had no frontiers. And of course, there should be no frontier in how we developed the answers and how we produce the scientific development to address them, to address it. We need to have the instruments for collaboration prepared in advance so that if, in the case of a crisis, we can deploy them immediately. Social sciences have a very strong role. Although in our panel we did not have social science, we have recognized its value. And especially also after the pandemic, we have to look specifically at what we could have done better and take it so that we are better prepared for the next crisis. In this case, also related to the social sciences, we should also look into the communication, also science communication, because the mistakes here were also counted in lives. So it is how we communicate to the public, also how we communicate with politicians, for example. All this is of relevance and was raised during the session. I would like to thank all 4 speakers. You were fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mistakes in communication were counted in lives. That's what I'm definitely keeping in mind. Now I would like to ask Agnes Robin to talk about the parallel session on environmental, climate change and mitigation. Please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Apologize from Gelsomina Papalardo, our moderator, who had some surprise with a return flight and had to leave very early this morning. So I'm taking over from her. So I'm not going to name all the speakers. We had very inspirational talks from these speakers. You can see their names, the titles, and I will move, because we have only 4 minutes, I will move directly to what was presented. So the first talk was about exposomics. It's about the cumulative measures of environmental influences and the corresponding biological responses. It makes huge use of, for example, of high-resolution mass spectrometry. And the approach is to measure as much as we can, trying to capture all information in a very systematic way to get an unbiased view. Very important, a collaboration between Europe and US in the context of the development of the AREN Research Infrastructure S3 project. Moving to the next presentation on, from Ocean Neptune, Canada. It's about collecting data on complex ocean system, making use of cable and standalone observatories, measuring from surface, water column, seabed, and subsea bed. And also expand to astronomy and high-energy physics with a neutrino experiment. Very much effort on data management, open data products, open data policy, very important. Also essential, building on having a good strategy plan, taking care of observing societal benefits, climate change mitigation. As regards social benefits, it's important to provide data for informed decision making. Some examples were about early warning system, tsunamis, use of the estimation of surface currents, very important in case of rescue operation, oil pollution, working with fishers communities, supporting initiative for climate mitigation, for example, with solid carbon. Our third speaker was from ESA, European Space Agency, about, of course, European Earth observation. It's about a fleet of 81 satellites for science, for Copernicus services and meteorology, which is operated by EUMETSAT. And in addition, many national and commercial satellites. It's without saying that Earth observation is much more than imaging. Lots of services provided by these capacities. Huge increase of data, and also important to connect very much with industry. Huge number of users, frontline data users, and much more other users. We were provided several examples in the context of Copernicus. Of course, free and open access to data, integrating high-value commercial data as well, mostly at very high resolution. Access is via a thematic exploitation platform, the concept of bring users to data. To mention very effective collaboration between ESA and NASA, in particular on joint access to data and algorithm. Last example, Destination Earth, which is a cooperation aiming at operational system to support decision-making, in one word, toward predictive Earth observation. It requires some capacity to integrate data from particular new space small companies that are very much leverage innovation. Last was about the contribution of European research infrastructure to environmental challenge, to try to address economic, environmental, and social sustainability. So that's the ENVI community. The slogan is "The Earth is our lab." It's about observation, experiments, and modeling, trying to organize the data to provide integrated and, more important, challenge and demand-driven services. It's important because nature and human are facing conflicting pressures, cascading risks, and so on. And in addition, in the context of climate change, changes are faster and more severe than expected. An example was with ICOS, the Integrating Carbon Observing System, which is also contributing to the global carbon observing initiative. So the effort is to integrate service, to provide data, for example, to Destination Earth and the digital twins, to improve, to provide faster response to society. And again, an example with ICOS about the estimation of the volume of the Nord Stream link recently, thanks to high quality and harmonized near real-time data. And last, it's about researcher infrastructure resilience and sustainability, and it's important that research infrastructure are having some contingency plans and preparedness, both, and also business plans and agility all together. And some key messages, there are many more than that, it's very succinct. Of course, essential, it has already been said many times, working across discipline is essential, for example, health and environment. It requires common definitions, common understanding. It was acknowledged that research infrastructure have still hidden capabilities to promote cross-disciplinary activities. Data policy is essential, open data policy, which was considered having revolutionized the research system. About global cooperation, it requires homework to be an easy partner at global and international level. Efforts to be complementary at global level. Lots of progress on interoperability, agreed data quality standard and so on, but still efforts needed. It's not about, also it was explained that it was not only about open data, but also open resources, open results. To note, in the health domain, you have the additional challenge of privacy that might difficult to share data, but there are ways to address it, so it's something to take care. There are some risks with open data. You need to assess quality, you need to ensure reliability, to make sure that you are using this data. You need them tomorrow, they still need to be available to you. Critical, cyber security, it's very high in the agenda. And finally, the sustainability of all the data system and platform per se, thinking in particular to energy consumption now. Last, cooperation with industry, very essential component of the infrastructure resilience, in particular with industry as suppliers to be considered. And that was, I think, my last word. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much for your summary. If I may ask to leave the presenter behind, or I will call you for the next panel as well. But since we have the presenter on stage, I would like to ask Mina Koleva, the project advisor of European Research Executive Agency, to talk about the summary concerning the parallel session of data and digitalization of society. Please.
Hello. Yes. Hello, good morning. I'm very happy to be here with you this morning, and I'm going to speak about data. You've seen that it's quite important, the prominence of data in answering the different challenges you have. We cannot do it without data, as you've seen from the previous speaker. So we want to know how the research infrastructures can do better to address data sharing, data curation, how we do when we have research infrastructures which are built, of course, locally, but they have to be interconnected globally. Those are our speakers. You can see their faces and you can ask them plenty of questions afterwards. And our moderator, Michael Arentov, could not be with us today. He had to leave. We've seen a few case studies during this session. We've seen the case studies of Destination Earth, which is a very ambitious digital twin, which is built in the European Center of Medium Range Weather Forecasts with the support of the European Commission. They want to have something like a game engine where you can have observations and models which are running all the time, and you can input your observations and you can stop at any point, change the parameters, and see how it affects the simulations. It is a very ambitious project, of course, and but the good point is that we are going to see first results even in 2 years. So next ICRI, be prepared. We are going to see the first results from Destination Earth digital twin. And we've seen also how in Japan they try to help their researchers use more data, how they have these data storage facilities where they can help them with the data management plan. They can even use artificial intelligence to correct their experiment and check if they are giving correct results. Other case studies were on, we heard from the African Science Cloud. We've seen that for them it's really important to have the involvement of the public, and society should be really on board, and it is something very important for the capacity building. We recognize also, our colleagues from Sweden recognize that every country is too small to address the global challenges alone. So we have to work together, there is no other way. And of course there are difficulties, but we should use our strengths in leverage these difficulties. Policy and researchers should always work together. We should not leave the one behind. We should have common ground of understanding and common place where we want to go. The policy should, of course, provide the framework of this collaboration. And we should not be afraid to make mistakes. I think it is a very important part. And here, because we don't have much more time, I'm leaving you with the challenges, a recommendation you can read. What I want to stress here is, of course, all these data have a very big and data-intensive models, simulations have very big environmental impact. We have to weight the pros and cons and see how we can continue with the development of these data structures in a sustainable way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and we will move on from parallel sessions to parallel teams, starting with societal and economic benefits and impact on research infrastructures. That's the team for Michael O'Neill, representing Canada Foundation for Innovation. Michael, please.
Good morning, everybody. Dobar dan. Bonjour. It's quite a challenge, I have to say, to be up here summarizing in 7 minutes what was 3 very interesting conversations from a wealth of people from different perspectives. So for those of you who are in the room or listening in online and who participated in the panels I'm about to describe, I ask for your understanding if I miss a point that you might have raised, because there's just so many. I'm not going to thank all the speakers in the session because there were so many, but I will thank Michael and Jimena, who prepared the notes and the PowerPoint for me, without which I probably would have spent like most of the night preparing this as opposed to being out at the Philharmonic with everybody else. All right, enough talking. So let's go to block 1. So block 1 was what I would probably have described as the interdisciplinary perspective block. We had perspectives from government, we had perspectives from a funder, we had Daniel, who gave us the media perspective, and we had also a speaker from an institution. And really, the key takeaways from this is it's really important to know who you're communicating with, and also in that sense, you know, alter your message and your story that you're telling based on the audience that you're speaking to. In other words, you can't if you're speaking to a funder, if you're speaking to a government official, the stories you're going to tell and the language you're going to tell is going to be much different than if you're talking to somebody in the media, for example, or somebody in a funding organization. We may actually know the kind of science that you're doing. The importance of show and tell was underscored by several, which is, we are in a visual world in some ways, and that's probably still true because, even more perhaps with the internet and communications technology. So if people can relate through things if they can actually see them. So that was considered to be, a best practice. Simple communications, especially in the areas of science that some of us are working in, it can get, sometimes a little bit overwhelming for some lay people to understand what it is that we're doing. But, comparisons can be useful as well. So finding a way of telling our story, again, to the audience, but using the terms and the things that the audience can relate to. Personal communications also was noted, particularly in these times when we're working with government officials who are our main funders, and you basically are trying to build relationships. And then finally, and this was a really interesting point that came out as one of the questions, in fact, so I'm happy that the question was asked, how much should you invest on internal communications, i.e. within your team, as opposed to communications with people that are on the outside? And basically, I think the answer was, well, actually, they're both important, because your internal people are your greatest stakeholders, so they need to know the story too, and they need to understand what you're doing and understand the value, so that when they're going outside, they can explain it to people as well. So, it's not an either or, it really is a combination of efforts. The second block was meant to discuss, how do we know if we're investing in the right things? Especially some of these infrastructures can be quite costly. And again, for the average layperson, it's really, perhaps very difficult to kind of understand, what the value added is of, many millions of euros, dollars, pounds, whatever, in an infrastructure. So again, the key points here were, it's really important to look at the world and make your investments so that people can understand what it is that you're working on, that you need to use the information that you have at hand to build your story on return on investment. So if you have a story about performance from the past, you can actually kind of use that to forecast into the future. That it's also important to kind of think of your global infrastructure in a way, your research infrastructure in a way that is perhaps more horizontal and actually reaches a number of audiences, not just the audience where your research infrastructure is, but actually even consider it in terms of a regional economy or a larger societal benefit. Some of the takeaways from the session were that, it's really important to measure for impact and quality over the whole life cycle of your RI. Quality insurance obviously is a basic in project management, and in some ways, particularly when we're constructing research infrastructures, we need to really treat these as, good project management principles. And again, just underscoring a message from the previous session, and that was an interesting bit, there were certain messages that were carrying forward throughout all three sessions, which is citizen engagement is fundamental. Right? If you don't have the public on board, you might have the science right, you might have, the scientific justification, you might have even the perfect budget, but if citizens aren't on board, particularly in days where, you have, as we say in North America, a NIMBY, not in my backyard position, so, the citizens in the region, the area that could benefit from the research infrastructures could actually, be almost your best spokespeople. So communities and research infrastructures, they're intrinsically linked. And I will just focus on the last message because I think it's really quite important, which is, global research infrastructures to address global problems and societal needs, right? In other words, almost by nature, the work that we do is global in nature and, think locally, act globally. So this would be, I think, how I would summarize that message. The final session on advancing knowledge, transforming lives, brought a perspective from different countries around the world. Basically noting that, we are in the global context has changed for many reasons, economic, geopolitical, and we've heard yesterday even in the remarks preceding the reception yesterday that, we are in a changing world of, globally at many levels. And so, you know, sustainability has to be embedded in the work that we do, understanding our contribution to kind of like the global whole, and that can be, you know, economic, societal, environmental. I mean, this is something that we need to consider. The open innovation model was discussed quite extensively as almost inherent in the scientific work that research infrastructures do. You know, if your research infrastructures, especially the very large ones that are based on international cooperations between institutions, governments, or whatever, you know, basically are kind of like the concrete example of an open science model. Social license to operate, social acceptability, and again, it's the same point about citizen engagement. Social acceptability is really important, right? We can't build, operate our facilities without actually having, you know, the people in the communities where we operate, where we exist, on board. So that's very important to ensure that you have social acceptability. And I think I'll probably end with the last point, skipping a couple in the middle. Well, I mean, the point of diversities in regions, I think, is something that needs to be underscored as well. And I would probably say that, you know, especially in regions where, and I'm probably reading a little too much into the comment that was made at the time, but I'll point it out anyways, that, you know, particularly in regions where there may be, how can you say, you know, misunderstandings among different groups, well, maybe science is a way of bringing people together. So that's my message. I think that's the message that was raised, and I'll probably end by just saying, you know, when you think about global challenges as an opportunity for research infrastructures, I think what's missing from that line is, you know, for global infrastructures to demonstrate their value to all of us. So if I would just summarize all of that in very few words, I would say that if you're managing, operating, thinking of constructing a research infrastructure, I think the message is build, operate, measure, explain, and then repeat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, my personal thanks for great work as the chair of the panel. Alors, merci beaucoup, c'était, ou vous étiez, vraiment magnifique. Merci beaucoup encore une fois. Merci. Czech is horrible. Let's go for the next part of the conference. Let's talk about the multi-scale ecosystem of research infrastructures. The sum up will be performed by the head of Large Facilities Office, National Science Foundation of the USA, Matthew Hawkins. Matthew, welcome on stage. The floor is yours, physical and virtual as well.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be with everybody this morning. Good morning to those here in Brno and to those online. I want to make it clear and start off by saying these are not my brilliant observations and ideas. They are the brilliant observations and ideas of our speakers and all of those experts in the room that participated in the Parallel Theme B session. So, as Michael said, I will likely as well do a poor job at catching everybody's ideas and thoughts. So again, my apologies if I missed anyone as well. So this was actually a very, very useful and very practical session where it focused on the ecosystems of research infrastructures, multi-scale, from small all the way to large. In some of these sessions, we actually focused on what we would call in the United States mid-scale research infrastructure, the smaller to mid-size, which I think, as you will see, struggle from many of the same issues that the whole research infrastructure portfolio struggles with. So we looked at three basic sub-themes within this: fostering cooperation at different scales, again, as I said, all from small all the way to large. Challenges in maintaining the synergistic relationships between all of these infrastructures. And the last section was extremely practical. It was really putting together a toolbox of ideas that hopefully a lot of you can take home, think about, and implement perhaps at your own, within your own organizations. So to drill into these a bit more, the first one was on fostering cooperation at different scales, and you'll see a lot of the same things that folks like Michael touched upon and others have touched upon, that the collaborative research environment is absolutely crucial to making these infrastructures work. No matter what the scale, no matter what the size, they are critical to the scientific enterprise. So we have to put equal weight, equal emphasis, and equal support to these smaller and mid-scale infrastructures as we do the larger ones that we tend to see taking center stage on the global global enterprise. Open scientific access, absolutely a must. We've talked about that in a number of sessions. You have to have open scientific access to these facilities to address these global challenges. The other thing that we're going to talk about in the other sessions is the two big challenges of staffing and funding sustainability. And as I said earlier, this goes across the scale of research infrastructures. In the very end, I'll have a list of bullets and ideas that the toolbox session came up with to help with some of these very pressing issues that we're all having. So challenges in maintaining the synergistic relationships. Democratized access, right? Access for everyone. Reciprocal in-kind contributions for operations. Very interesting concept that was talked about by our speakers and by our participants. Three things jumped out on how to maintain and expand the scientific value of the infrastructure. One, we've got to have trained experts, right, running these facilities. We've got to have the collaborative networks to make it all work together and answer the big questions. And that sustainability of funding question. And it's not just operations, it's upgrades. As we all know, we invest in a facility and in 5 or 10 years, a lot of these components of that infrastructure become obsolete. So it's not just about sustainability of operations. We've got to keep them at the forefront and the cutting edge of technology. One very interesting thing that came up is there's sort of this thinking that, you know, we really need to operate these facilities with a minimum 5-year budget. People talked about the challenges of having 1-year budgets and trying to work with funding that comes in incrementally and not being able to plan over a 5-year horizon. So think of sort of 5 years as the minimum that we should all be really thinking about so that these facilities can be sustainable. Shared funding models, I think we're all using those for operations, and I think the general sense was they bring more opportunity than risk for operations, to have multiple funders involved with the ongoing operations. And another key point, if you want to really maintain people and promote the expertise, is a strong identity culture for your research infrastructure. Really promote that, right? The value of your people will then be shown by their excitement and engagement with the facility that they operate. So that strong identity culture around your research infrastructure was a very important point for maintaining morale and key personnel. So 3 great quotes jumped out at me during this session. Equally accessible does not equate to equitable access, right? So just because your policies promote being equally accessible, that doesn't mean you have equitable access. We have to work hard at that to make sure the end result matches our intent as far as access goes. Second, this has been said before, think globally, work together, right? And lastly, probably my favorite one, networks are spider webs to catch big flies. Right? So these networks are really important. I'll touch on that in my last slide, but I thought that was a fantastic analogy. Think of the big flies that you can catch if you properly network, and don't try to do this by yourself. So lastly, this was the toolbox session, covered 3 different topics. Governance and management was the first one. I thought there were some great ideas here. Make sure you understand your research infrastructure's mission. Make sure there's clear roles and responsibilities for everybody in your organization. Remove departmental, and again, I'm sorry, I missed that. Make sure there's clear roles and responsibilities based on mission and need. Don't think necessarily around the old school about departments within your research infrastructure. Industry has moved away from this, right? Group your people based on what their mission and their need is within the organization, and try to break down these departmental barriers if you can. Have a strategic plan. Require your facility be acknowledged everywhere, right? In publications, in the data sets, everywhere. Leverage those institutional capabilities. Skill sets are also very important, both managerial as well as academic. And all those managers need metrics. Michael brought this up. We need those metrics, need those figures for communicate, use technology whenever you can. Training and education. There's very specific competencies around research infrastructure. We need to build those skills locally, and we need to keep those skills current. We need to promote education within our within our research infrastructure and develop clear career paths. That's one big challenge, right? How do we keep those people progressing up the chain, right, with skills and have a place to go as they mature and become better? Leverage those competency models that are being developed. Research infrastructure requires a certain set of competencies that I mentioned earlier. And I really like this last one. Build a sense of equity and value between both the academic side of your infrastructure and those that are doing the day-to-day work, those technical staff, right? Making them feel equally part of the research infrastructure, whether it's pay or whether it's recognition, is very important. So lastly, the networking. Understand who's around you. Know who's in your group, right? What infrastructures are doing the same work as myself. Leverage those professional networks, whether it's annual meetings or knowing equivalent people that could be your mentors, and it has to be a value-add proposition for everybody in the network. Win-win-win relationship across the board, right? Everyone has to contribute to that network, and everybody has to add value to it, or it's not going to work. So with that, thank you to esteemed panelists, all the colleagues, and my two rapporteurs who also made my job much, much easier. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we will move on to research infrastructures and sharing scientific data globally. Karel Luyben, President of European Open Science Cloud Association, is ready to give us the summary. Please, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me start by the disclaimer that was given by Michael and by Matthew. The same disclaimer holds for me. I don't pretend to be complete with all the things we did in 3 very interesting sessions. We decided in 3 sessions not to deal with how are the research infrastructures putting their data into other research infrastructures and how are they going to share their data. We decided to look at what are the facilities available or coming available globally, regionally and nationally in order to share data. So I will bring you from 3 points of view, global, regional and national, the results. And the aligning of these regional initiatives was the first one in the first session we discussed. Why is this needed? Well, science is global, that's clear in itself. The World Wide Web of fair data and related service can only be built if we do it worldwide. We need to have a vertical alignment. Those facilities need to come closer to the researchers' needs. We need to have a horizontal alignment. Those things need to be interoperable between each other. Well, how do we do this? We do this with several clubs, maybe too many. I was asking myself, we had a report from GOSC, the Global Open Science Commons Initiative, from OSCAR, the Open Science Commons Executive Roundtable, from GORC, which is more looking at the attributes, from the RDA, and from DataCite, which is looking at a specific attribute that can be used worldwide, the DOIs. And what did we discuss, and what are the lessons we've learned? The lesson is that the systems, if they work more together, if they integrate more into an harmonious system, will reduce the complexity, will reduce the cost. The data services and data access should be as easy as possible. We should work as much as possible to fair by design. If you make your data fair, if they come from the machine, they can be fair already by design, but also in the very beginning of your work. Offer data integration over the fields is an important one, especially to do multidisciplinary science. Have clear rules of governance to access the data. Standardization of metadata, an important development worldwide. Increasing the commitment of the global community by offering more incentives and rewards towards working with data rather than only looking at papers and citations. And maybe we should even oblige the researchers to make their data open in certain situations, or put a little bit more pressure on them at least. And last but not least, we expect that there will be a shift in priority from papers to data in the future. Then we looked at relating the regional initiatives. Why would we do that? To improve the sustainability of those initiatives. Together they're stronger than only in one region, and to share their experiences. How can we do that? By understanding the values and the experiences of the others, by understanding the common needs they have in the different regions. They are very often the same. by having institutions forming the backbone. I think that in the regions, it's the institutions, the universities, the research service providers, the funders that form the backbone for this whole network, this whole system. So it's not about the regional initiative, it is about the backbone that, let's say, supports the regional initiatives. And that can be done by combining national approaches, because very often you see that these things are nationally. We will see that in the next session. What did we see coming by? We had a presentation from the Australian Research Data Commons, from NSF in the United States, from the Chinese Academy of Sciences on the Science and Technology Cloud in China, from the European Open Science Cloud, EOSC, and we had a presentation from Red Clara and NREN in South America, showing how the network is developing in South America. Then the national initiatives, how do they compare? That was the issue of the third session we had, and what can they learn from each other? We had presentations from the German initiative on the NFDI, where they invest a lot of money into having clusters of researchers working in certain domains on data. Not money for infrastructure in physical sense, money for infrastructure in human sense and in content sense. We had a presentation from the Data Research Alliance of Canada, on a presentation from Japan on open science and research data, and 2 RIs from Czechia. What were the lessons we learned? We learned, and we knew already, that competition is stronger than collaboration. And thus, from that, we learned that more and more we should work in collaboration rather than in competition. Our systems are stimulating competition. Nothing wrong with competition, some competition, but collaboration has to win from competition. There's a lack of tolerance, lack of failure tolerance. So we should accept that we try things, they go wrong, we try them again, rather than be ashamed for the fact that they went wrong and that we did not learn from them. DOIs can help in awarding, let's say, research results in the form of data. And using data commons should be as easy as basically using EduRoam. I assume you all use EduRoam. If you open your laptop in another computer, in another, university, you immediately are online. Why should we not work as easy with, let's say, the data in the repositories you're normally using as we can work with EduRoam? For that, AAI is of crucial importance. That was stressed strongly. And above all, I would say trust in the people to share the data, trust in the organizations that have the data. And with that, I would like to thank the speakers, I would like to thank the moderators, and I would like to thank my rapporteurs that helped me give this presentation. Thank you for the attention.
And I would like to thank you, Carlo, for the summary. We have the chance to learn, despite we did not have chance to attend. Let's concentrate on transnational access to research infrastructures. Topic for Dominik Sobczak, Director General of R&I, European Commission. Please.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, everyone. We have been discussing over the last 2 days a lot about the essential contributions that research infrastructures can make to societal challenges. But to make that possible, we need to be able to access research infrastructures across the world. So this was the main premise from which we started when we looked at our session. We had the investment of 20 speakers, their time and energy and great expertise. So I will not name everyone. And now I will provide you simply a snapshot of this investment with also many thanks to Patricia and Inka, who have supported me greatly in preparing this summary. First of all, and this is the context for all the 3 sessions that we had on enabling access, we have to look at the broader frameworks. The broader frameworks where we operate is, on the EU side, we have a strategy for global approach to research and innovation, which focuses on shared values and principles and sharing those values with the international partners. And we also have the framework for global research infrastructures developed by the G7 group of senior officials on research infrastructures. Now, we discussed, first of all, 4 important principles that enable open access and that need to be considered when looking into access across countries. First of all, scientific equity for access, to have proper systems in place to enable them, so we need governance, and also openness of data for access and for reuse, and for sharing globally, as well as the focus on the people and their international mobility, which still, even with the development of different modes of access, alternative modes of access to the physical one, is essential. Now we have also identified a number of challenges which relate to unstable and missing funding, and the funding topic have been one of the kind of the leitmotifs that we've had throughout the sessions. We need agreements at the international level on who pays for TNA. We have the increasing complexity of science problems that leads to new access needs and leads to new access models. We have increasing multidisciplinarity and broadening of user base, which includes also industry, that brings to RIs less expert users. And that actually means that the RIs themselves need to be better prepared to serve those users, and they need to have stronger human resources and more human resources to make sure that they can serve these users. We need a suitable combination of on-site and remote access, which is relevant for Summarise, it's less relevant for other ones, but it is important to enable properly both types of access. And we also, at global level, need to identify gaps in the global RI landscape and see how we can address these gaps. All this we discussed within the first session that we had of the entire block, which focused on the principles for enabling international access to RIs. Now, in the second session, we looked at the lessons that we could learn from the RIs and for the RIs from the crisis that we have had. So first of all, we have to recognize that crisis, pandemic crisis, political crisis, energy crisis that we are facing right now, actually can help RIs to identify their weaknesses. They serve as a form of a stress test to an RI to see how they can operate if something unexpected happens. And we underlined a lot, and we heard a lot from the RIs that were sharing their experiences, that we need to focus more on preparing for crisis in peacetime, in regular time, so that we can anticipate any unexpected situations as far as possible, because you cannot anticipate every possible scenario, and then that will enable you to react faster and more effectively. So the main lessons learned, and I will certainly not do justice to all the examples that we had and all the great experiences that colleagues shared. Some of the lessons. First of all, we need to increase flexibility to adapt access models and use RIs in innovative ways. Because if something happens, like a pandemic, then the RIs need to very quickly change their operational models. We need better coordination within the different nodes of the RIs that are distributed, but also across the RIs. We need to focus more and invest more in open science and sharing, as they are key, especially in situations that are critical, across continents and across user groups, not only locally or regionally. It is also essential to maintain interactions with user communities, because in the end, if in the situation of a crisis, the situation of the lockdown that we had all over the world during the times of COVID, the users were the ones that were affected largely because they could not interact with the RI as they used to in the past. We also agreed that remote access is very useful, but it also has important challenges and side effects, including the less opportunities for the networking, which is essential for catching the big flies. RIs also, and that was what we heard was actually quite interesting, that of course at the national level there are crisis management plans, but typically RIs are not part of them. The question is, should they be? In some cases, probably yes. This is something that maybe on which we should work in the coming years to be better prepared for the future. And finally, the third session that we had focused on RI access in the context of complex science questions. How to promote global collaboration and science diplomacy by collaboration of RIs across borders. So first of all, we have to agree that addressing very complex science questions, be it in astronomy or environmental monitoring, requires so-called multi-messenger approach, so that we have RIs working commonly, working together, RIs from different sectors, offering different technologies and data. And sometimes, as in the different situations of astronomy, they need to react and coordinate at extreme speed. Very quickly, they need to react and align. In order to enable effective multi-messenger science, we need coordination and interoperability of RIs. and of the data that they generate across the world. In order to make global research infrastructures work, we need to develop, or they need to develop, a common identity and value proposition to their user community, to the broader global community, and to the society as well. And they need to establish legal or operational arrangements that will be agreed by the funders, so that we know based on which rules we collaborate. We also looked at how transnational access enables exploiting complementarities across RI, where the main challenge, again, at the international level, is indeed how to ensure the funding so that users, researchers can access research infrastructure seamlessly across borders. It was recognized that the EU provides a globally unique transnational access program, and the big question is how to get others on board and at which level to address this challenge. At research infrastructure level, funder agencies level, some kind of global cooperation fora, where to talk about this, where to find agreements, and then where to find the money in the end. Final point, we recognized an important role of RIs in helping to increase science inclusion and equity, and for that there were some practical examples that it is important to organize either regional centers or less advanced RIs to connect with those bigger ones, because they play an essential role in training of users and also serve more standard needs. And then the users are better prepared to access the top-class, world-class science facilities. Thanks a lot again to all the speakers and to my colleagues who helped me prepare the slides.